Students, welcome back to American Government. Today, we're going to be looking at criminal and civil cases. And these are two essential terms you're going to have to know for this lesson and for this entire understanding of the judicial branch. You really want to know what these two terms mean, because whenever you see those reality TV shows, you really want to be able to parse what is what. Whether you're watching like true crime stuff, or if you're watching like Judge Judy or any of that, you really want to know if they're talking about criminal or civil cases, or it doesn't really make much sense, right? So with criminal, we have really literally the word crim or crime within the word. So a federal, state, or local crime was committed, right? So an individual is accused of breaking the law. Civil means kind of something like, if you think of the word civil as in like civil war, you're having a disagreement with somebody, right? So criminal, crime, or accusation of breaking the law. And then civil is a disagreement. You're really being uncivil with them, right? It's people coming together to really work out a disagreement, okay? So there's this great infographic that kind of details some of the differences between the two. So in criminal law, an individual is accused of breaking the law, theft, drug possession, or like bracketeering, robbery, all of these different crimes that that could fall under this umbrella. It's the government who is really bringing that person to that case, right? So it could be like the state versus Joe Schmo, right? It's the government who has the prosecution in that case that they're trying to prove this person to be guilty. This is where you have like DAs or like district attorneys trying to prove somebody to be guilty. And the decision is based on the evidence proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused is guilty. This is where you will always have juries, right? And they prove the guilt or non-guilt of a person being tried for however many things that the person is being tried for. So you have the judge, again, like, and I might have mentioned this before in class, but the judge really just presides over it. They can deny evidence, they can deny motions by either side, the prosecution or the defense team, but it's ultimately the jury in a unanimous decision. They all have to come to an agreement whether to charge this person to be guilty or not guilty. It's not a majority thing, right? It's a unanimous decision. So these juries, they iron out all the details together. They come together with the judge and several other people from the court and ensure all the evidence that has been taken into account is reasonable, fair, and should be used in court, right? And the discretion, I can't overstate this, but the discretion of the judge in allowing certain types of evidence based on their merits is super important, because that's going to, in one way, affect how the jury is going to see these things. And they weed out members of the jury depending on their predispositions toward certain things, right? So if you have if you're on a jury and you knew the person who's accused of a crime, they'll dismiss you, right? Or if you've shown to have some sort of prejudice towards people on are particular who are accused, they'll dismiss you, right? So they want unbiased, objective people who are making these decisions as one, right? And you have to prove somebody guilty, right, beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt, right? So it goes back to the evidence. You have to be sure that this person is guilty to really be able to convict them in such a way. A civil case is completely different. This is if two individuals or groups can't come to an agreement. Personal injury, contract is a huge one. Divorce, a contested will, right? So this is where you have the plaintiff and the defendant rather than the accused and the government. That would be over here. This would be like the prosecution and the defense team. Over here, you'd have the plaintiff and the defendant. And this is based on something called the balance of probabilities. And then you have agreements or pretrial settlements before where you can iron out some of these decisions. Sometimes you'll have a jury for this. This isn't completely accurate. Sometimes you have a jury for civil cases, but not necessarily always. So that really becomes the discretion of the judge once again. And people aren't really being sentenced for anything. here. Usually it's monetary value you're getting from somebody by suing them. The best way to think about all of this structure is think of like somebody, if you're driving in your car and somebody hits you, right? Is there anything illegal about that? Maybe, not necessarily. We don't know yet, right? Somebody just hits your car, they bump your car, you get angry, you bring your insurance companies into it. There's nothing illegal about that, right? But you might call the cops. Maybe the cops find out that the person has been drinking. Well, driving under the influence, that is a crime, right? Maybe they hit your car and they started driving away. That's a hit and run. That's a crime, right? But maybe you're unhappy about somebody hitting and messing up your ride, or maybe they key your car or something like that. That can be worked out in a civil case, right? Sometimes you'll see these horrible crimes committed. Usually it's a criminal case and a civil case. So if somebody is assaulted, that's a crime, right? But they also might bring civil charges to that person as well, too. You can bring anybody, you can bring a civil case against anybody for anything. I can bring a civil case against somebody who I've accused of looking too much like me. That's happened before. People have accused other people of looking too much like them and brought them to court for it. Whether that motion to do that is affirmed or denied is really within the legal structure, but people have that right to file those petitions to be heard in court for any type of disagreement. Interesting, isn't it? Cool. So step 2, let's watch this video. You're going to identify and submit 4 differences between civil and criminal cases.
I want to draw a really important distinction between civil.
And this guy, he talks kind of like in the context of business a lot, but this is just a general thing I want you to pull out from it.
Civil and criminal law. This is one of the foundational concepts that you need to know. We have the criminal court system. It is completely separate from the civil court system, which is where our business cases happen. Now, it gets confusing because sometimes the two overlap. That you'll have a case that happens in criminal court and then it's also brought in civil court. First of all, a bit of nomenclature. When we talk criminal, we talk about guilt. So if someone is found guilty of a criminal case, they're guilty, right? In civil court, they are liable. So if we're ever talking about a business case, no one can ever be guilty of a business lawsuit, right? They are always liable. It's liability. So criminal, guilt, civil, liable. I always I try to hammer this because on tests at the end of the semester, I still see people who are writing that in a business case that they're found guilty. And this is really a fundamental term that I want you to know.
Guilt implies a crime, right? We're on the left side for being guilty of a crime or breaking the law, right? Liable would be on this right side, or they're serving a judgment that you're liable for, particularly a civil case.
Another fundamental distinction between these two is what kind of evidence is necessary to get guilt or liability. In criminal cases, guilt is found when evidence is clear beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a tough standard to meet. It's a high standard, and we want it to be high because we want to be nearly certain that someone is guilty before we're willing to take away their life or their liberty, right? So how much is beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, you can't put a number on it per se, but approximately, let's say 95%.
Isn't that interesting, right? So you have to be certain. If you're a juror and you are coming to a decision with your other jurors on this left side, you have to be sure, like almost completely sure that this person is guilty to want to affirm that they are guilty of committing particular crime.
A jury needs to be 95% certain that someone committed the crime in order to convict. If you are even 6% uncertain, you have to acquit them. So in a case like the O.J. Simpson case, where he was found not guilty, he was acquitted of the murder of his ex-wife, his defense team was able to instill just enough doubt, just even 6%, 5.1% doubt that he was guilty. If they could even get to that standard. Now, I know a lot of people think in a case like O.J. Simpson, oh yeah, he did it. He must have done it. He was guilty. Well, the jury did not find that reason beyond a reasonable doubt standard. It's high. We want to err, and overall, we want to err on the side of not convicting. Then we want to err on the side of convicting too many people. So that's why we have a high standard. On the civil side, it's a much different standard. It is called preponderance of the evidence. How much is that? Essentially 51%. If you're 51% certain that they were negligent, then they're liable. So it's a much easier standard. And what's at stake? It's just money. We're never putting somebody in jail in a business case. We're never putting them to death. We're just fining them, taking their money.
So this part is on the right side, right? Coming to if the judge feels that if they have a jury, right, you want to be a little bit more certain that this side is correct rather than the other side, and that's enough to settle a disagreement, right?
We're collecting monetary damages. There are a couple other terms where we have a distinction. So when we talk about murder, that's a criminal issue. So you're guilty of murder. Murder has a sister on the civil side, and that's wrongful death. So if in the case of O.J. Simpson, he was found not guilty on the criminal side, but he was found liable. They met that 51% standard. They didn't have 95% evidence, but they had 51% evidence, so they were able to really take his wealth. His ex-wife's family was really able to take his wealth. That's why O.J. immediately moved from California to Florida, because he could go put his money into a big mansion, and Florida has a statute that says in a civil case you can take their money but you can't take their house. In California, you can liquidate the house. So his strategy, he figured he was probably toast in the civil side. We come up against this distinction all the time. You might remember the George Zimmerman case from a couple summers ago, where a big public case where he had gotten into an altercation with someone. He was on a neighborhood watch program, and there was a gun involved, and Zimmerman pulled the trigger, and the young man that he was in the altercation with died. And so there was a big question of whether George Zimmerman committed murder, and the jury had just at least that 6% or more of doubt, and they didn't feel like they could rise to the standard of committing him to prison, taking away his life. So they couldn't meet the beyond reasonable doubt. Now, there will probably be a civil case if it's not already begun. And in most of these types of situations, the family comes in with a civil case. It's much more likely that he will get, that the family will be able to collect something in the George Zimmerman case financially. And so that's just how the system works. There are really two systems. Again, criminal is guilty, civil is liable. Don't use the terms interchangeably. When we're talking business law, we're always talking civil preponderance.
Cool. So he's talking in the context of business, but he brings up a lot of good examples for just really the basic differences between the two. So be sure to identify and submit 4 differences between civil and criminal cases based on this video. And then finally, step 3, you're going to make your own civil case and your own criminal case using the types of court cases article that I've linked to here. Be sure to adhere to the specific qualities of each type of case. Make them super dramatic so that I will laugh, right? If you do like a crazy man driving down the road, he hits your car and then he speeds away, then the police officers find that he was driving under the influence, then he robs a supermarket. That could be a very fun example of a criminal case, right? In several levels. Say you get into a disagreement with somebody, if you have an apartment and you get in a disagreement with your landlord, and you decide to sue them, right? So that'd be a good example of a civil case. So for this, you must create both a fictional civil and criminal case with a bunch of details, appropriately describe how and why the case is civil or criminal, explain how each case was handled in court. You're going to pretend to go through court with this, and then determine the appropriate liability or guilt of each case. So if you sued your landlord, what damages are you suing them for? What would be the judgment? What would they have to give back to you? If it's criminal, what is the person being charged for? Do they get the maximum sentence of life in prison, or do they get the minimum sentence and have to do just a few years, right? So be sure to include all those details. And then ultimately, you're submitting your responses to steps 2 and 3. And you all have a wonderful day.